Hello everyone, Ryan Schwertfeger here, and welcome to episode 7 of This Week in Oakland. Well, we've been very fortunate that we've had a lot of nice days over the last few weeks here in Oakland, but unfortunately this is one of the days where it's raining and the umbrella is needed. So hopefully, whatever day you're watching this, it's also a nice day, but if it's raining, make sure you're donning the appropriate rain gear, of course. I'm standing in front of Oakland's municipal building here at One Municipal Plaza, and not just because it's a nice backdrop, but I want to use this opportunity to thank all of our borough employees who have been coming into work still and doing their job amidst this COVID-19 epidemic. Some employees are coming in almost every day, some are coming in on different shifts, some are working from home some of the time. So obviously things are not completely normal as we're having to deal with all these different circumstances that are related to the times that we live in. But I do want to make sure that we give appreciation and thanks to all of the people who work inside Borough Hall, our other employees who work at the police department, the DPW, the library, all of the different borough entities. So I want to make sure I give them a thank you, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of many residents of Oakland, if not all the residents of Oakland, and say that we appreciate what you do, and thank you for continuing to work amidst this epidemic that we're going through. But now for our first segment, we caught up with Dr. Loredana Briganti, who you might remember talked about pet dental health in our first episode. Well, now she's back and she's filling us in a bit about parasites and our pets, and things that we should take a look out for, and things that we can do to make sure that our pets don't have any of the types of diseases or parasites that can infect them and cause not only them a lot of problem, but even potentially us a lot of problems. Here's Dr. Briganti.
Hi, my name is Dr. Loredana Briganti, and I'm a veterinarian, and I've been practicing in small animal private practice for 26 years. I've been living in Oakland for 4 years now, and I'd like to do a little segment on parasites and how they can affect your pets, and also what to do about them. So now that the weather's nice, we're all outdoors more, and our pets are also outdoors more. So this gives more opportunities for them to get parasites. Some parasites are seasonal, where they are. Most of them are worst in the warmer weather, but some you can get year-round. So sometimes the prevention is important to do year-round. So we are going to just do an overview. This isn't an exhaustive list of all the parasites. I took a 3-month course in veterinary school to learn this topic. So it's obviously now we're just going to do a quick overview just to help you out with some tips and ideas. So first let's talk about what a parasite is. So a parasite is an organism that lives on or in another species and derives its nutrients from that species at the detriment of that species. So it's something that has a negative effect, and so it's the parasite and the host, and the host is the one that is usually affected negatively, obviously. And some parasites that our pets can get can also be transmitted to humans and can affect humans. Often they can't live and reproduce in the human like they do on the pets or in the pets, but the humans can get disease from them. So that's another important reason that they should be prevented as much as possible. There's two main categories of parasites that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about internal parasites and external parasites. So the ones that live on the outside of your pet, and other ones that live on the inside, like mostly in the intestines or even the bloodstream. So The products that we're going to talk about, certain medications and different products, and some of the products can help with both internal and external parasites at the same time. So usually most people get away with using one or at most two products on their pet to prevent the parasites. So that is, the products that have come out, especially in the past decade, let's say, make things much easier than they used to be. So, so now we'll go into more specifics on the different types. So the external parasites are, the most common ones are fleas, ticks, and mites, which you've probably heard of these. Fleas mostly cause irritation to the pet's skin, and some pets can even be allergic to fleas, which creates even worse disease. Their hair can fall out, they can get skin infections, so that could be pretty serious, for them. And the other bad thing about fleas is because of their life cycle, they can infest your home, which it is not easy once they've infested your home to get rid of them. So one reason that the fleas can infest your home is because of the flea life cycle. So the adult fleas lay eggs in the environment. The adult fleas mostly live on the pet, but they lay eggs that roll off the pet into the environment, usually where the pet sleeps or lays down a lot. And then after a period of time, those eggs turn into larvae, and thankfully those two phases we do have products that can kill them. But the third phase is called the pupa phase, and that there's no chemicals that can kill it. So that is why this could be such a big problem. And so basically you have to wait until that stage passes and then kill them as adults, and also try to work on the rest of the life cycle. But also in that pupa stage, they can stay dormant for years even in your home. And they actually somehow know that a pet is not present, and then if a pet becomes present, they can come out of their dormancy. So they almost seem like too smart. But so that's why it could be really hard. And in general, if your house does get infested, it takes about 3 months to really clear it out. That's treating your pet and the environment. And that's where you might have heard of bombs, or you could use exterminators, but it's a real problem. So the key with fleas is preventing them. So the other most commonly known external parasite is the ticks. So ticks are mostly carried by mice and deer outdoors. Those are other hosts for them. And they hang out on vegetation such as grasses or bushes, waiting for your pet to pass by so they can jump on and they can get a blood meal, because that's what they're looking for. And that's the nutrients they need. And the big issue with them is they carry some pretty serious diseases, such as Lyme disease, which you may have heard of, which can cause limping and fever and even affect the kidneys of pets. And there's actually a fairly long list of other tick diseases that can affect your blood cells, and also cause fever and just general illness. So one important thing about ticks is if you find one on your pet, is not to be sure you remove it properly. And if you don't know how to do that, consult your veterinarian so that they can do it properly. Two things definitely not to do if you find a tick is to apply any heat to it or any other chemicals which might irritate the pet's skin or injure the pet's skin. Another type of external parasites are mites, and mites can affect the skin, such as the scabies mite, which causes extreme itchiness, and also ear mites, which live in the ears of the pets and cause a lot of discomfort as well as infection. Usually those are passed by mostly cats living outdoors or dogs, and and the scabies are passed mostly by foxes and other wild animals. So the other category of parasites are the internal parasites. And one of the most serious ones is called heartworm. And it is an actual worm that lives in your pet's heart. And both dogs and cats can get heartworm. In cats, they actually produce more of a lung disease, so things like coughing and things like that. So the heartworm is passed by mosquitoes, and if your pet gets it, it's very difficult to treat it. The treatment process is about at least 6 months long, and they can even pass away during the treatment of heartworms. And it's somewhat painful, the treatment. So again, with heartworms, as with fleas, prevention is the key, because you really don't want your pet to get it. And heartworms are very common in the south of the United States, but especially since people have been adopting more dogs from the south, rescues bring dogs, puppies up from the south to the north, we have been seeing more cases of heartworms. So that is something to be aware of. The other most common internal parasites live in the intestines of your dog and cat. Some of the common ones are called hookworms, roundworms, whipworms, and tapeworms. And some of the problems that they can cause are diarrhea and weight loss and vomiting. And so it's important to get rid of those. Most commonly they are in puppies and kittens because they get them from their mother, often while they're nursing. But also it can be passed, the eggs are passed in the stool, and they can infest the dirt in someone's yard, or even if a pet has these parasites and where they pass stool, they could be just in the dirt, and it's nearly impossible to get them out of the dirt once they're there. So again, trying to decrease the amount that's in the environment by preventing it and treating the pets is important. So now that we've told you a lot of the bad news about parasites, we're going to tell you some good news, such as how to prevent it. And so there's lots of products, and some are over the counter that you don't need a prescription, but some of them are prescription medications. So you have to go to your veterinarian and have most likely an exam, sometimes a blood test, and so that they can dispense or write a prescription for the medication. One thing to remember, there are different products for cats and dogs. And some of the products that you can apply to a dog, you cannot apply on a cat. It could actually cause the cat to pass away. So make sure any products you're using, you use it according to the label, for exactly what it says on the label it is good for, which kind of species, and exactly how they tell you to use it on the label. So some of the products treat both internal and external parasites. One example of a medication that does that is called selamectin, and that's a topical medicine that you place on your pet's. It's a little tube of liquid you empty on your pet's back once a month, and it actually prevents internal parasites such as heartworm and intestinal worms, as well as fleas and some ticks. And now some of the companies are combining it even with a stronger tick prevention, especially for cats, and so it's more broad spectrum. Other preventives are once a month oral pill, and usually they're flavored, so it's like giving your pet a treat. And some of the examples of the medication in those are ivermectin or milbomycin, and sometimes they combine those medicines with other types of anti-parasitic medication so that they get the intestinal parasites as well as heartworms. And some of them even have a component of flea protection in them. So again, there's lots of pros and cons to each product, and it can get a little complicated, so it is best to consult your veterinarian for which products are best for your pet and for your preferences, and according to what your pet might be most likely exposed to. So that it's always important to talk to your veterinarian about that. So some of the oral medicines are once a month, as I said, and some are even once every 3 months. The topical medicines are usually once a month, but there are, now they've made some flea tick collars. They would also be considered a topical medicine, and some of them last for 8 months. There is even now an injection that can be, they're given every 6 months or 12 months, and that prevents heartworm. So you could just give it once a year, and you don't have to think about heartworm prevention for the rest of the year. So as I said, there's pros and cons to each product, and sometimes you do have to combine products in order to get a more comprehensive parasite control. So be sure to talk to your veterinarian about that. So it's important for your pet, but it can also, parasites can also affect humans, and this is why prevention is key. In the United States, 10,000 people a year, the CDC reports, get roundworm, which is one of the most common intestinal parasites that dogs and cats get, and it actually is known to cause blindness in a certain number of people every year. So as we said, prevention is key. So now we're going to just do a little demonstration of how simple it can be to use these products on your pet, and we're going to use our pet Riley to show you. So this is Riley, and so let me just demonstrate some of the topical products. As I said, you've got to use it according to the directions on the label. So some of them say, this is an example of what a tube of the prevention would look like, and he thinks it's food. But so sometimes you just put it right on the back of the neck, and you just dump the whole thing, if that's what the directions say. So you would apply it right here, because that's obviously, if he turns around, he can't lick that spot. So one of the spots is right on the back of the neck. Other products want you to put it by the tail, by the base of the tail, and sometimes they even say start at the tail and kind of make it run up the back. So again, you always want to read the directions and use it according to the directions. And other pills, like I said, they're flavored, so the pets enjoy taking them, and Riley already had his prevention for this month, so this is just a regular treat. But to show you how easy it could be, you just have to give him a treat once a month, once every 3 months, and that helps prevent. So it's that easy to have happy and healthy pets, and so now that the warm weather's here, we can go outdoors and enjoy time with our pets and be safe.
All right, welcome back. I've taken the very long walk across the parking lot from Oakland Borough Hall. So now I'm in front of the Oakland Public Library, which only about maybe now, what has it been, a year, 2 years, they actually reopened the old part of the library, which is the portion that's over here on this side that had some of the old stonework on it. And a few years before that, they opened the new section of the library, which is over here to the left, in which, you know, the main entrance is right over there. Getting a little cut out of the camera there, but Oakland Public Library has been a fantastic resource for many years and for a lot of people in town. And even though the epidemic is going on, there are a lot of online resources that the library is offering. So you should make sure you check out the library on their Facebook page and on their website in order to find out all the things that are still going on at the Oakland Public Library, even though it is still, for now, closed for people to actually go into the library. But for a lot of people who lived in town, you know, the Oakland Library has a lot of history related to it, and there's a lot of buildings that are in Oakland that just kind of blend into the scenery that you might not know actually have a lot of history behind it. So we spoke with Jerry Angermuller, who is from the Oakland Historical Society, and she took us on a nice walk around Oakland, showing us just some of the homes and some of the buildings, and explained that there's actually a lot more history to them than what meets the eye. So let's start off at the Van Allen House, which is probably the most recognizable historic building in the borough of Oakland. and we'll go from there. So here's Jerry.
So this is Jerry and her husband Klaus from the Oakland Historical Society, and we want to do a little house tour of Oakland now while we're enjoying the out of doors. So we're starting with Oakland's most important historic building. It belongs to Oakland itself. This is the historic Hendrick Van Allen House at the corner of Franklin Avenue by Ramapo Valley Road. So it was important because of its vicinity to what used to be called the Valley Road, following the path of the Ramapo River from Pompton Lakes all the way up to Suffern and into New York State. And the troops of George Washington's army used this path many times, with George Washington and his officers also being among the troops on July 14th, 1777. And because of the weather as today, it's a rainy day and the roads were muddy, George Washington stayed here as guests of the Van Allens for one evening while they were planning to proceed north up into New York State. You see the sign here for the new work that's been done on the roof recently, and the grants that were received to do this. So the restoration of the house is based on a postcard from the early 1900s, when the house belonged to Edward Day Page, the second mayor of Oakland, from 1910 to 1911, when he added windows to the upper story and really beautified the house. This was the center point of his Weigerberg farm, which he ran from the late 1800s until the early 1900s. But when Edward Day Page remodeled the Van Allen house, it was at the time that he was starting his Weigerberg farm, dairy farm and produce farm concerned. He bought between 600 and 700 acres going up the hill where Hiawatha Boulevard is now, and had quite an extension. He produced a lot of food for the silk workers and other workers down in Patterson. And this was the office building right across from the Van Allen house. You'll see up on the top sign there that it says Weigerberg Farm. And this was the place where his office manager lived, and downstairs he kept a lot of his produce and the dairy products. Okay, the Weigerberg farm made use of the stream which ran underneath this office building. In the basement they had their dairy products and whatever else they needed to keep cool. And as the stream ran underneath the house, even in the hottest days in summer, the produce was kept cool and fresh by the cold water running there. So this is where the Allerman Brook runs underneath the stream house of Edward Page's Weigerberg Farm office building. And it still is a nice cool place in the summertime. He used the same heavy stonework as he had learned from the Van Allen house to hold the cooling and hold the climate in a temperate way. Yeah, this was an important area for the Van Allens when they had fresh water here. And across the road, there was another brook where the Bogert family also had a farm. Yeah, here you have a good view of the stonework of the Van Allen house. So this has been here since at least 1748, when Bergen County was declared a county, and the house was designated as a house at this point. So in 250 some years later, the stonework is still keeping the house in good shape. As I said, across the way was the Bogert family. They had a mill that ran off of the stream that came down and joined with the Allerman Brook here. So that's continuing story of the water power of Oakland. That was one of the most important things to the settlers here. So this historic house is the Bottom House on Dogwood Drive. along Ramapo Valley Road. It's a Demarest House. It was built in 1789 by Jacobus S. Demarest, who was a veteran of the Revolutionary War, and his farm became as wide as 180 acres in this area. So the Demarest family is a well-known large family throughout the county. And of course there's a Demarest House across the street where Bill Potash currently lives that belonged to Samuel P. Demarest, who was an important part of Oakland's history. But this is another example of the beautiful stonework that the Dutch utilized to keep their houses cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And it is excellent that they've been able to maintain the house in this beautiful condition. We'll go look at the marker, the historic marker up front. So this says the Jacobus S. Demarest House, built about 1789 by Jacobus S. Demarest. The frame wing was added later. Demarest served in the Revolutionary War. Over the years, his farm grew to 180 acres. In 1835, his son Daniel J. Demarest inherited the farmhouse. In 1863, it passed to his daughter Letty Ann, and in 1894 to her son Daniel J. Fox. Daughter Irene Fox Munsinger was the last of the Demarest line to occupy the house after 190 years in the family. I know the Fox family also had a house further up the highway, and there weren't that many families in the area, and they did a lot of intermarrying and combining and strengthening. Hi, we're here at another significant building in the borough of Oakland that has a lot to do with what has made Oakland so great over the years. This is 360 West Oakland Avenue. It's now called Engineering Laboratories, as you can see, but if you look over here, part of the building is a much older building, and it's got a beautiful red roof and a stone foundation. And this is the original Vernum Springs water bottling plant from maybe 100 years ago or so, when Oakland used its resources of spring water coming down from Long Hill Road in the backwoods back there to make very pure water. So this is to show that Oakland's history water has been a very important resource there, especially our drinking water. We're very proud of our drinking water that we get from artesian wells these days. It's fed by springs, which are nowadays called C1 springs. We have to protect them so that the drinking water stays pure, and we can be sure of having drinking water for a long time. So this, we still have old glass bottles that they have the Vernum Springs Bottling Water Company imprinted on the glass. That's how people used to do it, with recycling bottles. And we still have the building here, and it's still in good use with engineering labs now. So Mrs. Remington Vernum, who was the owner of the Vernum Springs, sold it to Canoes, a bottled watering company, in 1906. Mrs. Vernum learned about the quality of the water when she started the Lilac Manor over on Long Hill Road. She made a beautiful summer resort place there, and she had a deep well and the quality water coming down from the mountain, and she realized how people loved the water, and and then Canoes Watering Bottle in 1906 took over the production of the watering company from there on. And she still had her Lilac Manor, which is still available today, with living quarters and vacation spots there. So this is Otto's Floral Manor on Long Hill Road, 16 Long Hill Road. And we were talking about Mrs. Vernum, who had the water springs. And I believe this is the Lilac Manor originally. That was where she had the visiting spots for her tourists in the summertime. and this is still a beautiful piece of Oakland's history. It belonged to the Otto family, Ike and Helen Otto. Ike was the building inspector for many years in town. And it was also the place where Les Paul and Mary Ford lived before they moved up to Mahwah. When they were a young couple, they would perform concerts in the area. And they were good friends of Helen Otto's, and she later had Les come back and talk about the days when Les Paul and Mary Ford duets were starting out and would give their concerts here in town. So thanks to Mrs. Remington Burnham for starting the lilac in the floral manner. So this is a well-known spot in town along Ramapo Valley Road. It has beautiful architecture and a long history. So you can see the turrets, and if you are able to get into the basement ever, you can see that it has a beautiful stone foundation. That means it was originally built quite a couple of hundred years ago. So and now it has been restored to have this be in good shape, and still has many rooms being used. At one point, the Bogart family owned this building, and they used it because of its connection to the Ramapo River. They had a business that they needed water power for before electricity, and they used the Ramapo River to run their business with the water wheels. The Ramapo River had many businesses and industries that used the water of the Ramapo River. The brush factory is down closer to the river, one building next to Great Oak Park. That was a large, they made all kinds of brushes, paint brushes, toothbrushes, clothes brushes, and they so made some dams along the river to power their water wheels. And there are still remains of those raceways back along the park area. And that's why this building has existed so long. It's had many different functions. It was a music store that many people remember years ago, and now, besides having apartments, it's a law office. So I hope you recognize this building.
All right, hello everybody, back again, still needing the umbrella. I'm here at the Oakland Recreation Complex, and I have the Danny D building, or the Danny D'Elia building, as a lot of people know it as, behind me. And another part of this COVID-19 epidemic is there are no sports going on. So, the rec complex, aside from the walking path, which is now allowed only to go in one direction, the walking path is open, but a lot of the other things are closed. Some things are starting to slowly come back. The tennis courts have reopened, batting cages are allowed to reopen, but most of the sports themselves are not allowed to open. But even though I wasn't a big sports person, or I didn't really play sports growing up, obviously one of the things that we all know is, you want a good, healthy meal before you start playing the games for the day. And one of the most classic things that we always hear about is having a nice pasta lunch or a pasta dinner before playing, because you need those carbs in order to have enough energy to play in the game. Well, it would be a little insulting, I think, if we did a little demonstration on how to make pasta. However, one of our submitters, Marilyn Stallman, she decided to make bread, which is probably the next best carbohydrate after pasta, especially for us living here in New Jersey. We love our bread, we love our pasta, we know how good it is. So here's some step-by-step instructions on how you can make your own bread at home from Marilyn Stallman.
Okay, the ingredients needed to make homemade yeast are water, flour, and you need a glass bowl to put the flour and water in, and a towel to cover the glass bowl. Hi, I'm going to show you how to make homemade yeast to make bread. As a lot of us have been home the past few months, we've taken on new interests. A lot of us have started baking and have tried making bread. One of the biggest challenges to making bread is that it requires yeast to make the bread rise. And it's been very hard to find in stores. But I did find a recipe online to make it at home. It takes a few days, but we'll give it a try and see how it works. The things that you need to make your own yeast include flour, water, you need a glass bowl to put the flour and water into, and a cloth to cover it. Okay, what we start with is we need to, you make the yeast with equal parts of flour and water. And then what it does for a few days is it's called fermentation. Why is yeast needed to make bread, you ask? Well, what yeast is it's a single-celled organism. It's naturally found in flour and is also naturally in the air that we breathe. And the water activates the dormant yeast to make it ferment, which is what fermentation is the cells, the simple sugars in the flour and in the air activate the yeast to make it produce carbon dioxide and ethanol alcohol, which when the bread is baking, the alcohol turns into gas, which helps the bread bubble and makes it light and fluffy, but the way that fresh bread in the store usually is. So, without further ado, we are going to mix our ingredients to make the yeast. First, we need some flour. And it's very important to have exact measurements when you make a recipe, because if it's not exact, it can be too watery or too dry. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a half a cup each of flour and water. This is a half a cup of flour. I'm going to put it into the bowl. And here we have a half a cup of water. And I'm going to mix the water in with the flour. Now it's important if your water is chlorinated, it's better to use bottled water because the chlorine can kill the yeast. But we don't have to worry about that here in Oakland. So I'm just going to mix it up till all the flour is absorbed. And we leave it at room temperature because the additional natural yeast in our air will help this little ball of dough here to bubble and rise. And in a few days, we should be ready to bake our loaf of bread. I'm going to cover it with cloth. And what we're going to do twice a day is add a tablespoon of flour and water and mix it up. And in a few days, we should be ready to bake. We're ready for the next step to baking bread. The yeast has been rising for a few days, and here's how it looks. This is my yeast starter. And now we are going to prepare to make the dough for the sourdough bread. The things we need are whole wheat flour, need measuring cups, a bowl, spray to nonstick spray for the bowl, and water and salt. Okay, our first step here is to take I need a half a cup of my starter to put into the bowl. I'm going to measure it out like so. And I need a wooden spoon and a spatula. I forgot that. Yeah. There are a lot of steps to baking bread, and to make the yeast from scratch, it takes time, and I understand why most people just buy their bread at the store, because it is a lot quicker and easier. Okay, so we've got our yeast in the bowl. I have 3/4 of a cup of lukewarm water, which I'm going to add, and I need 2.5 cups of flour. That's one. Two. That's 2.5. Next, we mix up the dough. I have to mix it until the flour is absorbed by the water and the yeast starter. And I also need to add some salt. We need 1.25 teaspoons of salt. I just have to find my teaspoon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this I'm going to cut back on the sodium a little bit and just add 1 teaspoon of salt. And mix it up. And now that it's pretty well mixed, the next thing we have to do is knead the dough. And this is messy. again, this is my first time doing this, so I'm not an expert at it, and hopefully it will come out good. I've baked cookies and cake ever since I was a kid, but for bread, this is a first. So we'll see what happens here. Okay, that looks pretty well kneaded to me. Now we have to wait. And what I have to do is keep in the bowl and cover it and wait for an hour and a half for the dough to rise. And then we'll put it in the oven. I think it's time to put the bread in the oven. Covered it, we let it sit and expand it a little bit. And I have a tray sprayed with nonstick spray. And we're going to put bread dough. I'm going to just shape it a little bit. Looks good enough. And I have everything bagel seasoning to put on top. That's up to you if you want to do that or not. Some people just put salt or pepper, or some people put nothing at all. This has onion, garlic, salt, pepper, sesame seeds. Good stuff. Okay. And the oven is at 425. It goes in for 25 minutes to a half hour. And we'll see how it turns out. See you in a half hour. It's time to take the bread out. Let's see how it looks. Smells good. There we go. Look at that. Gotta let it cool down before I slice it up and eat it. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Well, that just about does it for us here on this episode 7 of This Week in Oakland. And I thought it would be very fitting to end this episode here in front of the Valley Middle School, where a lot of our 8th graders are going to be graduating very soon. Unfortunately, at the current time, it looks like they're not going to be able to have an in-person graduation because of all the rules and regulations, making sure that everyone is staying safe and social distancing with the COVID-19 epidemic. But we want to make sure that our graduates are still recognized here at This Week in Oakland and on Oakland TV. So here's what I'm asking for all of the parents out there who have graduating 5th graders, graduating 8th graders, graduating high schoolers, and graduating college students. Send us an email to occ@oakland-nj.org. Tell us the name of your graduate. Send us a photo of your graduate, preferably your graduate wearing their graduation garb, or if you don't have that available, send us a professional photo. Maybe they're in a suit or a nice button-down shirt, something professional looking. Send us that information. Tell us what school they're graduating from. So whether it's any of the elementary schools, the middle school, Ramapo, Indian Hills High School, or even the college that they're graduating from. And if it is one of the elementary schools or the college, tell us what grade that is as well, so we know. So if you send us all that information to OCC at oakland-nj.org by June 20th, very important, June 20th, that's going to be our deadline. If you send us all that information, we will include a nice, as part of a nice photo slideshow, your graduating child's picture and information on a future episode of This Week in Oakland. So again, please make sure that's the graduate's name, the graduate's photo, the grade of the graduate, what school they're graduating from, and make sure the picture is either them in their graduation attire or at least a professionally dressed photo. And send that to OCC at oakland-nj.org by June 20th, and you will see that on an episode of This Week in Oakland about a month from now, once we're fully into June, and we're starting to think about graduation. Kind of scary that that's coming up already. So, again, as always, thank you for watching this episode of This Week in Oakland, and we'll see you next week. Hopefully, not raining, but we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.